Perfect. So this looks great now. I'm just making sure that everything is in place. Okay. More. Okay, so live streaming is ongoing right now. Okay, perfect. So we are live right now on YouTube. Okay, so things are set up for the day today. Today is 20 August 2024, and it's Thursday. It's a lovely day over here. And my friend Sultana, she is joining, Salma Sultana, who is joining from Canada. And it's my pleasure to have her over here today. And as you know, this year I'm running a meetup, Women in Tech. So I'm inviting all the women who are there in the tech to come and talk about the technology. And today's session is a little different. Okay, we plan out something little of Excel, but more about talking about communicating effectively with the data, right, Sundara? So we are going to see that how you can communicate effectively with your data. So it's very important. We may be knowing good Excel, but it's very important for us to learn that what we have, how we present it, and what we talk. And Sultana is placed in Canada, and I will leave the floor to her, and she can tell more about herself. And Sultana, the stage is yours. Welcome to today's Saudi Arabia Excel Meetup, and welcome for Women in Tech.
Thank you very much, Faraz. Thank you for inviting me, and it's such a pleasure to be, having an opportunity to speak to you and everyone. Yeah, just very quick brief about myself. I was actually, so I've spent my career in data for almost like 20 years, roughly, and I was an analyst. And then I moved to Canada very recently. Actually, my entire career has been in Dubai. Then we moved to Canada recently, and I eventually, as I moved here, I became I didn't want to go back to corporate anymore. So I started like, training and consulting, and I actually became a content writer in as well. So, and as I did that, I realized there's this huge gap um, in out there about, where people actually don't talk much about, they talk about the tech bit of it, like how do you create something in BI or Tableau or Excel and so on and so forth. The gap from after development to the communication bit, um, that bit is there is kind of a real gap there, and that's the part I actually really do a lot of training and talking and consulting on right now, which is something which I will be focusing on today as well. So we all kind of cover a lot of things, in my, so by the way, also to let you know, my career has been built on Excel pretty much because, but then that's not again what I generally talk about, because, but we can leverage on that as, I show you different examples along the way, but um, the gap that is there, in the way of how once we develop something, and then how do we present that, or not necessarily present, or how do we deliver that message to the right people, and to the right audiences. That's a huge gap, because you will never have one kind of an audience. You will not have one kind of a need. One specific data set can be delivered in different ways to different people for the different reasons. And so often we forget to um, keep that in mind, So very often we will see, oh, okay, a senior manager is asking for specific visual. We just instinctively feel like, oh, we have something available in the report, I'll just copy paste it and send it. But you have to understand the senior manager is not looking for a dashboard or a report level kind of a visual. You have to fine tune it for the reason that they're asking for. So those are the few kind of things, and I want to kind of focus on a little bit. I won't go much into detail because it's a very detailed course, but just one thing I wanted to kind of, if it's okay to share my screen, and I'd like to show a like little framework, if that's okay for
Sure,
us.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, you can
So we
please
have,
feel free to share your screen.
because I want to share my screen, I want to show lots of, examples of why there's such a gap and why it's necessary, like in real life examples of, and I've kind of, replicated them. and to show that, you know, why is understanding the communication side of it so important. So if I just share my screen, so just let me know if you're able to see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Right. Okay. So this is anyways a huge presentation, but I'm going to skip through it just to the main slides wherever we need, right? But I just want to start that everything that we do in data, like once we anything that we do to communicate, once we get our work done from the analysis phase to the delivery point, everything is built on a foundation called, which a lot of us have heard of and we know of already, or if you're learning, it's called cognitive load theory. You know, this is something we all need. Now, once we have this in the back of our minds, this is our entire data communication foundation is built on this, right? It is basically nothing but the way we understand, our audiences understand information, it becomes easier for them, so it's basically how much of the mental stress you're giving to your audience. Now, our mind itself is built upon like three important principles. I want to show a quick framework. I want to maybe it'll give you an idea of what the theory is basically, right? This is just a very quick framework I want to show you guys, right? But what happens is when and when we're receiving information, when you're delivering the information to your stakeholders or whoever is asking for information, right? Um, our minds, first of all, whether it gets stored there for for a very brief period of time, right? This is called the sensory memory. We first sense the information. So normally what happens is when we're looking at a chart or when we're looking at any kind of a graph from far, you'll notice that first, even when there's like a trend which is going downwards or we're showing, we don't really look at the values. We look at it when we say, okay, you know what, it looks like it's going down. Or even when you look, watching the news, we say like, oh, it looks like the stock prices are going up. We're not reading the values, but we're just looking at the trend, right? So that's our sensory memory. We sense the information first in split of a second, and then we read the data, right? So this is our sensory memory, and this is the part where whenever we deliver information, right? In that split second, whoever is reading, your audience is the one who is going to decide in the mind whether this is too much for me or not too much for me, right? So if you're delivering a really technical chart, like one of those spider charts, or really complicated combo, dual axis charts to maybe an older demographic, they will kind of get away from it. They will feel like, this is too much for me, or I'm going to come back to it later. What happens is you have already lost your audience in that moment, right? So when I'm going to refer to everyone as an audience, like, whoever we deliver to. So when we first encounter information, you know, we let's say I'm an audience, we will have something which is called sensory memory. Our sensory memory is what, is basically at that stage, it filters out a lot of things at that stage itself, like things like borders, things like the decorative lines, things like labels on the side, like things we know that is not really needed for us at the moment. Our mind automatically filters out, right? So it basically keeps the most, the impression of the most important things, and then it moves on to the working memory, right? And this is the mental workspace. Okay, this is like, the whole processing power, where the processing takes place, right? And this memory, this so-called working memory, is very limited in all of us, right? We don't have infinite working memory. No, it's very limited, right? We have very limited capacity, and we have limited duration, which is why when we present something, we have to make sure you are helping your audience process within that mental capacity that they have, right? It's literally like I have I have like a 10-year-old kid. If I'm going to teach him about physics, maybe for 30 to 40 seconds he will listen, or maybe a few minutes, and then he will tune out because it's too much for his memory or his working memory to understand, right? So every person has a different kind of that level. So it kind of depends. This cognitive load is, it's from person to person, but you have to study your audience before that, right? So you understand what demographic are they from, what is their, by demographics, I mean um, the older generation CEOs and and senior management who are usually a little bit older demographic, they need a little bit more simpler graphs. So we have to kind of simplify it for them. People whose English is not a first language, I have had difficulties presenting to them as well in the past. Even for them, I have to simplify a lot of charts because so you have to consider their cultural backgrounds as well. Something not a lot of us don't think of it, but it's very important. Think about um, just in general, their not only English in general, but their cultural background in terms of where they come from. So, I mean, I'll be very honest, and because I worked in Dubai, I used to have to simplify a lot of things for my Middle Eastern bosses as opposed to my the bosses who are from the Indian subcontinent, because they're very numerical forward. So again, you have to see what is their number process, like how are they strong in terms of analytical minds. So many things we have to consider, which we forget. We think like we as people of data, it looks good to me, so it should be fine for them, right? And this is when we end up doing what we call as data dumping, for your audiences, right? Because there is only so much a mind can take, and we forget that. So your audiences, they cannot process at the same speed as you can because we are people from data. We understand the data. We are analysts. So we feel what is right is not necessarily what is right for them to understand, right? And this is where your cognitive level you have to think about cognitive level in the sense, the mental stress you're putting on the other person, right? It's very limited, right? So our job is to minimize the cognitive stress, which is the stress on their working memory, and maximize their understanding, right? So you can do things like, simplify visuals, minimize any kind of distractions, organize information in a clear way, put them in a proper hierarchy, use clear labels, even use clear arrows. This is one of the things I talk about a lot also, generally when I'm talking about uh, data communication is, something as simple as if you're saying something is trending up, we use something called as annotations to point it, use an arrow to point that it's trending up. It's literally the same thing when you're actually stopping on a road and you're asking someone, can you show me the direction? You will notice the person will say, go straight, go right, but they will actually point it with your hand as well. Go straight, go right. That's because they're reinforcing what they're saying with their hands. They will tell you, right? Go straight, go right. They will use their hands as well. It's literally the same thing we have to do, or it's recommended to do when you're communicating with data to your audiences, right? If you have something that you want to show trending up or trending down, reinforce it with an annotation like arrows. Right? So our job is to basically make sure we make that working memory bit less stressed as much as possible, right? So once we move the work to the working memory where the actual processing happens, then we move, from there, the key information moves to the long-term memory, right? This is the memory which basically is where you have information retention, right? It like you try to present knowledge with. So another thing I want to stress about, what a lot of us again don't often, kind of consider when you present data to your audiences is if you want them to kind of feel like um, you want them to remember the information. So obviously a few things is to simplify, and obviously a lot of things is just to basically keep it as less complicated as possible. Another thing which a lot of us kind of forget, and it's so important, is connect the data to their existing knowledge. This helps in the long-term memory. So um, for example, like they're aware of something already. The audience might have so we call these heuristics or existing knowledge in terms of um so let's say different companies will, so we have the red, so for example we have red, amber, and green. That's just an example I'm giving off the mind, right? So or we say, red is for something bad and green is for something that's going good, right? That is heuristics, which, we are having mental expectations already that, but if you actually say, if you present a positive performance and then you put it in red, thinking that you're going to highlight it in red, that actually is very conflicting, right? So that does not fit with our existing knowledge, right? So, or something like that, so so try to fit things with existing knowledge that your audience has, right? When that happens, when you're able to simplify information and give out the key information without or with least amount of mental stress, and you're able to fit it with what they know, that's when things get retained in our memories faster, right? This whole thing happens like, obviously it's a huge map, but, like a framework, but all of this happens literally in like split of a second, or maybe, in our minds, from moving from the working, from sensory memory to working memory to long-term memory, and it's at that working memory stage where a lot of people will continue engaging with your content, and they will look at your dashboards, they will look at whatever charts you give them, or they will get disengaged. And this is where, a lot of we say what a lot of the work that we give to our audiences, our clients, our stakeholders, the charts and the reports and the dashboards, that disengagement is when you have totally lost your audience. So you might have a lot of analysis done, you have made a lot of discovery in your work, but you have not delivered that point to the audience because they were not able to understand the language, the analytical language or the technical language that you delivered. So, so that's one thing we really, really need to, keep in mind. I'm going to like just really quickly go through a few examples, to show you what I mean by cognitive load. And I think we will understand why it is so necessary to keep in mind small details as we create charts. And by the way, all of these charts I'm going to show you, 100% of them has been done in Excel. So, okay, so I'm just going to like create, show you sometimes what do I mean by cognitive load and why our entire communication, anything that we communicate in data, the foundation of it is built on cognitive load theory, right? So for example, I'm going to show you this one, right? Over here, it says the idea is for audiences to get a high-level overview of sales performance, right? What if I have an executive who is asking for it, right? More often than not, we will have, so there's like, you will have operational, audiences who are like from the operations, who are day in and day out running their business. And then you will have your analysts who are in-depth knowledge, they're having knowledge about what's going on in the data itself. And then you have executives who sit at the high-end strategic level. They need strategic decisions. They need high-level, overviews. If they ask you, so, if let's say the audience is your CEO or if your CFO, for example, right, or your GM, and they're asking you, can you give me a high level performance so I can, quickly take it off to a meeting? And if you give something which is like over here on top, notice over here, this is something a lot of us do, and I've also learned it myself from my own mistakes. And I used to think like the more I give, the better it is, right? That's another wrong mindset that we need to clear. We often think more data means richer analysis. It's actually wrong sometimes. It's the quality of the work that you're going to give, right? So sometimes more data can actually lead to more confusion and a lot of misled conversations as well, right? So for example, over here, it's just literally a simple chart, right? I'm showing a target, and I'm showing an actual on top, and I feel like this is going to be good. I'm showing everything. But, the moment I give this to the executive, he's not going to make, so that, I mean, it's going to be very hard for him to carry a conversation with another person, or in a meeting. But instead, if I give him the one at the bottom, notice over here, I'm giving and so I could give both, right? Or I could just give one at the bottom itself, right? But the idea is I'm going to help him carry his own conversation. I'm going to make it easier for him. So it's so much faster and so much easier for me as an executive to say, you know what, 4 out of the 12 months, we actually missed our targets. And, on an average, we were short by, let's say, 15%. See, I'm roughly making an average in my mind, right? So a lot of things are going on over here, right? And I'm easily able to carry the conversation, right? But imagine now if I give the top chart to the executive, he would actually have to sit and figure out, one by one, where was it lower, where was it higher, then do his own calculation, which could also be wrong because, you are not going to get an executive who's going to take out a calculator and sit and do it for me, right? We don't want that, right? So we have to keep in mind who the audience is. I would maybe give the top one to an analyst, to an operational manager who might want to look in a little bit, details and drill downs of month on month data, but not, necessarily to an executive. This is where cognitive stress comes. We feel that we are giving the right visual because there's no there's nothing wrong here, right? We are being honest about the data, but it is just not fit for the person who really wants to see, right? So things like these, we often kind of don't consider, and this is when will often notice that you did a lot of work and you've given some, and you delivered your work, but in the end, your manager comes and says, you know what, the CEO decided to go with someone else for the presentation, or the CEO decided, you know what, he's not interested in the dashboard. Well, you know what, there are a lot of reasons. One is because they have realized that they are not getting what they want to see instantly, and you lose a lot of your I wouldn't say like trust because of like you're honest about it, but trust in the sense like I don't think this person can, do the level of or give me the level of information I need. So they lose that level of trust in terms of the ability for you to deliver what they want, right? So this is why, a lot of the things we deliver, even our own credibilities are a lot dependent on how much we deliver rightly to the right audience, right? So this is one example. I have plenty. I'm just going to maybe go through just a few, or if we have time, like, so something over here. This is by the way, a very interesting example. Again, a lot of us make this mistake, right? So let's say we are having some, training in, two branches, right? And we want to see how each of the revenues in each branch improved after the training, right? So, look at the one on the left, right? We are showing before training and after training, and these are the sales. Branch A had 150 and branch B had 120. And then it looks like after the sales training, visually, it's, the sales has improved, right? The only problem is over here is um, we have done we have grouped it by time. So we have done before training for branch A and B and after training for, branch A and B separately, right? So another thing we need to understand is when, and I'm sure we also do it on a day-to-day basis, whenever you're going to visually read a graph, um, our audiences don't necessarily look at the labels. That is the first thing they don't look at, right? So whether it's an axis or the y-axis labels or the x-axis labels, no, we first, and this is the way our mind works, we first visually look at the shape of the data. We make up our minds based on the shape of the data, and then we go into the labels. And sometimes we don't even do that because we have already made up our minds and we move on, right? So naturally, when we think about, a before and after, and again, this is again how our minds are, right? I'm saying, so our existing knowledge is what, whenever we want to compare before and after, we want the before and after to be together, right? So before and after, right? So if I give the one on the left, right, there is a chance 50 to 60% of our audiences, they will not realize that this is not a before and after. This is actually branch A and branch B, and the after is kept somewhere else on the side, right? So this is again where sometimes it can be ineffective. You can end up leading to misled decisions, So one of the things, a lot of a question that I get when I'm training, and it's a very good question I get actually, is if there are labels already, which is, and I've written the labels, then why should the audience get confused? right? Well, that is exactly what I mentioned, right? Um, we read data from our eyes first, right? And that's just the way our brains work most of the time, right? So there are two things. One is we obviously, me as an executive, I'm just going to quickly see, okay, fine, there was a training before, and I'm going to assume this is before and after, right? And I'm going to move on, right? But although I could have actually read it wrong the whole time. So one is because we might be reading it wrong, like we make up the information in our minds and then we move on because we think we read it right, but we didn't. And second, because it doesn't fit um, in our, because it doesn't fit with our existing knowledge in our minds, the way we are used to seeing before and after, there is a level of conflict that happens in our mind. It's literally the same thing where you will take a lot of time if you go to a new country, and if you suddenly realize that, the red means something else in a signal and the green means maybe, if they flip the red and green and yellow, you are going to have trouble. You will get adjusted to it eventually, but it will not happen on the first day because it's in the back of your mind, it's conflicting, right? Red means stop, but the cars are going. Something is going wrong. It's the same thing in Canada over here. I have to get used to turning right on the red signals, because it's not your right of way, but you're allowed to do it, and mentally it used to be really hard for me because I used to go to a hard stop and just wait there, and I used to realize, wait, I can go. And then so it took me a long time to realize it's red in front of me, but I can actually still go to the right, and take a right turn. So that's the thing. It's about heuristics, the way our minds are having existing knowledge, right? So the same thing, simple things like these, we feel like we're delivering it correct, but it is not fitting for the audience, right? So simple things like alignment, simple things like the way we present the axis, or just really casual things, not even manipulating the data. Simple things like these will really toss decisions upside down simply because we didn't realize that our audience did not read through it. But you have to understand, you have to keep the worst in mind. Assume that your audience will not read through the labels. They are going to quickly go through it, especially if you have an audience who is of a higher level in a hierarchy. They're busy people. They just want to see the shape of the data. They want to see the big picture. They're not there to sit and read the labels most of the time, right? So if you have that kind of a situation, then give it what we are, like, so give the before and after, or even when you're giving red, orange, and yellow for your your KPI indicators, keep it in alignment with red, like red is doing bad, or even the down arrows for we're declining, or the green arrows for performance is improving, and so on and so forth, right? So simple things like these, we we kind of forget to do, and it kind of makes all our efforts go in vain. No matter how much of analysis, hours of analysis you do, it all goes in vain because somebody made a wrong decision, is because you made them think the wrong way. At the end of the day, you might argue that I gave everything correct, but the who's to take the blame? It goes to the analyst or whoever does it, right? So something like this is another very strong example I want to talk about. Again, somebody will tell us, give me a consecutive 3 years performance. We immediately sometimes just make up our minds and assume, okay, you know what, maybe they want, we give like, most of the time we will end up giving something like this on the right, right? We'll give like 3 years targets, but then maybe this is not what they wanted to see. We often forget to ask our audiences, like, what exactly do you want to see? Do you want to see a consecutive trend, or do you want to see a period over period comparison, which is, which is the one over here, right? So often, imagine if they wanted to see a consecutive trend, but you actually gave a period over period comparison. How difficult would that be for, to carry a conversation, right? And especially, let's say if you had like, so I'm showing a declining trend here, right? But what if there was one which, it showed 2021 was moving up, right? It would be very hard to figure out over here. Like, there's two lines going down, there'll be one line going up, it would be confusing, but this is not what they wanted to see, right? So few things like these are increasing the mental load of your audiences, right? So I'm just going to quickly rush through. I'm going to maybe skip a few of them as well, right? Basic things. So I'm going to very lightly go through this again, simple things, even when we're making progress charts, make sure we give some kind of an end deadline, like not deadline, rather end line, end point, right? especially when, it makes it visually so much more easier to see where is the progress, right? So notice over here, this is what is the progress of of each project, right? When you have 100%, or an endpoint given, it's so much easier to see, visualize in our minds what is the progress, right? Simple things, right? So I won't spend much time on this. I have a lot of examples, so maybe just quickly rush through them. This is a classic example I wanted to show you guys of what happens when they're asking for, I have an important meeting. Can you give me can you show me the full performance with the focus on Q2 and Q3 or something like that, right? Like, let's say that's the order you get, from your manager, right? We instinctively think, I'm going to give everything so that they can very clearly see what's going on, and then we feel it's going to be a really rich data, and that's the whole mindset that we think, so we feel like the more we show, the more we are able to kind of impress, right? And this is where a lot of things go wrong again, so we will we will feel like this is the right way to go. We are showing month on month, and we're not showing trends. We really just want to compare one month to the other, right? So this is why sometimes, so this is when we use bar, by the way, not trend lines necessarily. They just want to really compare month on month, right? But this is not doing any help. But instead, if I aggregate them, or add the totals at the bottom, and I even highlight Q2 and Q3, notice how I have made the graph to fit what they really want to see, as much as possible. And this is when we say we need to simplify, right? The quality of conversation that I can have as a senior manager or an executive from the bottom graph, which is, where I'm highlighting the quarters and I'm showing Q2 and Q3 specifically in a darker hue. Think about the quality of conversation that guy will have, as opposed to if you gave a graph right on top. It would be a very patchy conversation. He would be going through the numbers. He would have to do the calculations in his mind of April Q2, let alone calculations. He would have to split in his mind, April, May, June, and then he would to aggregate them in his mind or sit with a calculator. A lot of things can go wrong. First you lose your executives will get angry, or your managers will get angry. Second, they could be doing the wrong calculations as well. So this is another thing, if so important in data is do the calculations for your audience, right? So this is just an example to show the aggregate, but if it were a real scenario, I would even add percentages over here if I could, as in, how much percent and how much better is, 2012 better than 2011 or something like that, So add percentages or add arrows, whatever it is, right? Do the work for your audience so they don't have to, because so this is again, we need to remember, we are the people from data, right? The audience is not necessarily as technically skilled as we are. So it is our job to help them see, the things which they cannot easily see. So calculate the average for them, give them the totals, show them the percentages, give them the arrows, make their conversation easier so they can easily see and carry the conversation at a flow. Right. More often than there are some times when I used to, the head of my department, he used to message me on WhatsApp from the meeting room that quickly, can you send me the picture of last month's graph? And I used to have to send him, and I used to create one quickly. Obviously, because we are analysts, we maintain really technical, data, but then I used to have to quickly simplify, make a really simple graph, just percentages, very basic one in 5 minutes. I used to send him a picture. But I used to have to take that 5 minutes extra step to make sure that the picture I'm sending him, he can actually look at it and, go with the flow of the meeting at that time, instead of going through all the numbers, So you have to follow, the context as well. In what context are they asking the information for, right? If the head of the department will, message me saying that I'm in a meeting with my subordinate who is the operations manager, and I want to appraise him for his monthly performance throughout the year, then I will not send the high level one. Then I will send maybe the one on top, because this is what is going to be needed for that context, right? So this is so important, understanding the situation. Again, something we often fail to realize when we are um, talking, or or taking instructions of what they need. When we talk to our managers and when we talk to stakeholders or clients, and they ask and they tell us what they need, we just take the requirements, but we don't upfront ask the questions as well, which we have to. This is the more you understand, what they need, what is the context, where are they coming from, what is the background of they you start, you kind of start simplifying the whole picture in your mind as well. Then you start realizing, what, okay, maybe for this situation, I do not need to give month on month, and maybe I need to aggregate it into quarters, right? So imagine two situations, right? I'm an executive. If I'm sitting and doing an appraisal for my subordinate, who is the operations manager, I will give the one on top. But if I'm an executive and I'm sitting opposite another executive and we're discussing, or maybe I'm, and then we're discussing about the finances and how much the overall revenues were this year and how did the quarters do, I have to give the one at the bottom, right? It's literally the same executive, but different situations. Different situations will call for the same data set, but different way we present, right? So, again, all built on your cognitive load theory. You give the top one immediately, there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of mental stress your audience has to take, right? This is a simple another one, right? I won't go through this in detail, but just whenever we are making notes or annotations, try to keep it as close to the data points as much as possible. I've seen charts like these where people feel like, oh, you're going to clutter the charts if you put it too close to the charts. But, and then they're built on this statistician, Edward Tufte's principles about don't clutter your charts and chart junk. That you keep that in. We need to keep that in mind as well, not to add extra distractions. But having said that, don't take it to the point. Don't take your cleanliness of your chart to the point that you kind of distract from the message itself. So sometimes people will say, oh, I'm going to put all the notes to the side. Well, you know what? That whole back and forth of labels and going back to the data point is going to cause a lot of confusion, right? You're also going to lose your audience as well, right? So, this is something related with proximity, right? The closer your notes are to the main data point itself, the easier it is to understand, right? So as much as possible, try to keep your annotations or your notes or, your comments that you're putting close to the main data points, right? So yeah, that's like an easy one. I'm not going to go through this. This is as usual. We all know. I have a few examples to show you guys, right? This is like just avoid distractions as much as possible. Keep it as simple, right, as possible. This is another one which I was talking about aggregating, right? Aggregate uh, your data when you don't need to show sometimes when which is not relevant, right? So if I really want to talk about, how is my weekend, let's say Saturday, how is my Saturday performing against the rest of the week? I maybe don't have to show everything, right? You can just show other days of the week and Saturday, right? So basically aggregate wherever you don't need too much details, right? So it's the same thing like I showed you the previous charts. I won't go much in detail with this, right? This is another one. This is so classic, right? We all love making combo charts, dual axis charts, right? The problem with dual axis charts is a lot of people don't read dual axis charts correctly. Most of the audiences, right? It's very easy for technical people to read and even catch mistakes, in dual axis charts, but a lot of people don't understand them well. Sometimes the scaling itself can confuse them. Sometimes I think one of the biggest problems that happens, another problem I've noticed is whenever these lines crisscross, they start making assumptions about this crisscross bit, even though they're not really related, right? They try to find some kind of a correlation, between the intersecting bits, but even though they're not really related at all, right? So all kinds of things happen when you're showing dual axis charts, right? And it is very easy to mislead your audience as well if you don't do it correctly. So in those situations, I really just feel like, vertically split your charts, something like this. It's a really great idea to make it easy. So you can have a single x-axis, and put you have two y-axes. It's literally two graphs. And again, I've done it in Excel, so it's literally nothing but two different graphs. Put one above and one at the bottom with the single x-axis, right? I've removed the x-axis of the top chart, and it's really that simple, right? Just vertically split it, and it becomes easier to understand even for the audience, right? You don't have to undergo unnecessary conversation, go through unnecessary conversations about what's happening in the line and the part where the lines are crossing. Those conversations are really hard to explain because it's hard to tell them that then it doesn't matter if they cross. So yeah, so dual axis charts, be careful when you're presenting them, and especially when they're, and be careful, what kind of units you're using. Sometimes, if you're using, um, you know, dollars in one side and units on the other side, that's okay. But if you're going to have two units which are both dollars, then you don't need a dual axis. You can have a single axis and do it. So a lot of people kind of make that mistake. So just understand how the dual axis works in terms of what units you're using before you just, start using it. This is another one. This is, by the way, you guys can do it in Excel. This is really cool. A lot of people This chart, by the way, is fully automated in Excel in the sense like you could do this in your dashboards as well if you're presenting. This is just a very interesting trick I have done here. So one from just a cognitive theory, I have made this easy. So sometimes if the conversation is about the variance itself, then make the variance the hero of the story. So if, sometimes so this is good, if I just want to talk about errors. So let's say this is, the number of errors I'm allowed to make. So let's say there is a cap, that you cannot make more than 50 processing errors in this month or, in every month, right? So these are the 4 months. I actually crossed the threshold, right? Which is fine. I can see it, but if I just want to see by how much have I crossed the threshold, visually, it's so much easier to see that extended threshold, how much they extend from here, right? So this, by the way, guys, is just a plain stack chart, right? It's I had to add it, like for this is just to let you know because I think in all of us this is an Excel forum, but this is literally 3 columns, and I have kind of put like formulas in which this there is a stack over. So whatever there's basically it is less than 50. The red part basically was zero. It was a zero. That is why the red part actually doesn't show up in this chart. Wherever it is more, then I have the second column which shows up, and then the stack chart builds up from above. So yeah, I'll be happy to share this if you guys want it later, like the formulas I've used. But this is a really cool trick you can use just to highlight the variance, and it can automate it. This is all automatically. At the moment you change your values, this is not manually made red. It happens by itself because it's actually a stack chart. So the second stack is red, the bottom stack is gray. And so depending on wherever it crosses 50, the top stack builds up on this, and then it starts, you see the red bar. So yeah, do this for when you want to showcase variances specifically, right? Things like these. This is not really, not going to go much in detail, but just something like this. If you have a lollipop chart, sorry, if you have something, like something really as extensive, like this, which is like a really long bar chart with lots of bars, it creates a sense of blur in our eyes. So if you give this kind of a chart on the left, and if you give it to your audience and they stare at it long enough, they are going to start feeling a kind of a blur, because it creates that kind of a zebra, or I think they call it a Moore effect. I've left a link over here, so yeah. But if you have something like this, go and do it as lollipop charts. Just visually, it feels so much more like cleaner and so much easier to read, right? Or even better, just put it in an Excel with a data bar on the side. I actually prefer that option as well, right? So you could do that. Simple things, right? Even something like this. This is another thing which, we need to keep in mind. Step charts, whenever you're having something where you want to show a constant, wherever, like, in data, or you might as well use a step chart instead of a line chart. Again, this is done in Excel as well, right? Something like this. So I want to show a price that was constant for, from 2010 to 2011, right? Notice over here, it looks like it was constantly dropping from 2011 to 2012. It looks like it was declining along the way, but in reality, the price fell at the beginning of the year at once. This is so whenever you have periods where, like interest rates or inflation rates, or like, or stock prices, you have periods where it's constant and then it drops. Instead of showing a line chart, show it as a step chart. You can see the drop immediately. Otherwise, the slant in the line chart will make it, it'll give you an assumption that it has been declining over time, when actually that is a wrong, impression, right? So simple things, right? I'm gonna like speed up a bit because I don't want to like, kind of, hold you guys off from on too much on this. But yeah, even stack charts, split it into grid charts wherever you can, right? Um, it makes it so much easier to understand, right? The reason we say to split it is because apart from the blue bar, the green ones are very hard, the gray, the yellow, and the red, because they don't have a single baseline. It is so hard to compare, So for example, this one itself, your mangoes and oranges. I mean, it's, the red one or the orange one, the one you can see over here, it's hard to compare these two, right? Whereas in reality, you will notice over here, it's actually 2.2 and 3.1, you will see, but it visually almost feels the same, right? So just split it, and show it as separate graphs. All these are also called as panel charts, because you're putting them in separate panels, or grid charts, right? Um, Drop lines, accessibility features, so important that we forget. Um, I really love to do this, adding very, very subtle drop lines, especially when you have like, so this is fine. Imagine if you have a chart where it's like really long, which is like maybe having 2 years, and you have like 24 months, and you have, some kind of a bar graph and a line chart at the same time. Sometimes um, it gets confusing to align the specific data point with the axis on, so you might end up comparing, selecting the June data point and reading it for August or something like that, for you to align which part on the line chart belongs to which bar, just see if you can align it this way, or even when you have just overall, also you can align it to the axis itself, right? It visually gives you a sense of alignment, and it makes reading so much easier, and as opposed to if it's not there. Think of it more like an accessibility feature for so many people, it helps a lot of readers to kind of, as it's kind of a helpful option, for a lot of readers, but make sure it's somewhere very subtle and in the background. Do not let it come in the foreground and affect the actual chart, right? So go, like I usually like to go with gradient lines, so, it almost disappears into the background as it goes down. Make it very light gray or whatever it is, but just make sure it doesn't come so much in the foreground. Keep it flushed to the background, right? So I'm just going to quickly go through what are the impacts of misleading ones. So let's look at a few examples quickly, right? How do we confuse people? How do our executives, so some simple things like these, right? Instead of giving huge scales, you know, we almost feel like we don't pay attention to these, we feel like, what, they needed a graph, let's just give it away, but things like these can actually cause a lot of um, wrong conversations. Sometimes you will be surprised at so many people who still get confused about how many zeros are there in millions. Instead of reading as 60 million, they might read it as 6 billion or something like that, and they confuse it, so avoid all that confusion. Instead of giving so many zeros, first, you're not only confusing, second, you're also taking up a lot of real estate on your screen. And who wants to have so many zeros like that, right? Just make it smaller, give your revenues like this in millions, or just simply do it like this, right? So just try to simplify the scales, right? This will help your audiences to, kind of not get confused at all. It's so much easier. right? Again, not to mislead, do not, I think this is a very famous one, a lot of us know, but still it's good to be careful with. Do not start your accesses without, as in always start from a zero. Do not cut your accesses from an access from the bottom, right? You will notice, because what happens is it exaggerates the height difference between bars, which is it's a very misleading thing to do, when you're presenting, right? Just the difference between 82 and 75, the amount of variance you're seeing, the exaggerated difference, it could make conversations go completely different as opposed to this. So team A and team B, look at the difference between 82 to 75. There's not much of a difference from if you're having a proper zero baseline, right? So avoid truncating the y-axis because it exaggerates the difference between bars, which is very misleading, right? Another thing a lot of us do, just kind of don't add extra axis on top. It kind of makes trends, the changes seem small. So keep it proportionate to the data, you know. Um, yeah, these are just actually, I have a lot of these examples. These are actually from my training files. So I have a lot of examples to show. So I've picked a few important ones for you guys. Yeah, something like this, if you have a pie chart, so a lot of people hate pie charts. There's like it's a polarizing opinion there. Some people hate it, some people like it, some people are okay with it. I'm in the okay bit, because pie charts are sometimes, they're actually better than bar charts, specifically when you want to show something like a quarter or a half, you know. um, 50% in a pie chart or 25% in a pie chart, a quarter of a pie is easier to see than you shading a quarter of a single bar. That quarter of a single bar, you will never know it's a quarter. But a quarter of a pie, because it's a right angle, you will know it. So sometimes, in some situations, I usually like to keep it limited to 2 to 3 slices at most, never more than 3 slices. But yeah, if you have too many categories, skip the pie, go with, a bar graph if possible, right? It's so much easier, and our eyes are more, as I mentioned here, it's more sensitive to length of bars than parts of a circle. So, this is not really doing much help. Skip the pie if you have too many categories, right? 3D graphics. This is another thing that can mislead a lot, because notice over here, the 14% in team C and 9% in team A, the size of um, the slices, they look almost the same, but they're not, right? So basically, 3D can distort the perception of the size of the slices, right? The relationships between the slices, between the pies, it gets distorted. So we don't want that. So avoid 3D, graphics, and keep it 2D wherever you're using it. Simple things like these. This is a mistake I used to do a lot back, in the early days when I was in my analytics, is, the boss asked for the sales for last year and this year. I will give last year and this year. The thing is, our managers, when they ask for data, or anyone, they assume that that they're managers and that they need more details, right? But it's the thing that we know, but we don't know that they think like that. You know what I'm saying? So the manager is going to think, he's going to pick up the phone. He's going to tell you, what? Can you quickly send me for all the chocolate brands the sales for 2014 and 2015? You will say, okay, fine, I'll send it to you. And then you send up the one on the left, which is the one over here, because that's what he asked for, right? But in your mind, um, in our mind, we think this is fine. But the reality is, we often forget that the manager is not going to tell you, what, while you're sending it, make sure you give a bar graph on the side, make sure you show me what are the percentage differences. They're not going to give you that instruction because they think that you already know that, because you are an analyst and you know that the manager is asking for it. So it is your job as an analyst to give it. And the managers think that way. But then when you don't send it, they get disappointed. That's the thing, right? Whenever we give data, right, they're not going to explicitly tell us that show the variance or show this and show that. So ask them. Sometimes they don't need it, sometimes they need it. So whenever I used to, so much later in the, obviously with, after a few feedbacks, I realized that, oh, these guys need more. And, I remember, um, several cases like these. I just used to send it. I used to send tables without totals, without averages, and I remember, um often I never got much. Like, I used to get feedbacks like, why is it not there, and or you should, where is the total, can you send me the total again. They just used to call me and tell me, like, can you send it to me back with the total, or can you send it back to me, with the graph. So I just used to send it because they're telling me to do it, so I'm doing it, right? And then I had a boss, a change of management in the middle. And my immediate manager was from an analytics background itself. And because he was already from an analytics background and he was way more experienced at that time than I was, um, he's the one who actually opened my eyes to understanding or delivering data beyond what is asked. So he used to tell me, that why are you not adding the totals when you're giving? Why are you not giving this? This is what managers want to see, and because he was an analytics, as in he was a manager from analytics background, the best of both knowledge he kind of gave me, and this is when I started to realize, oh wow, managers expect a lot from you to deliver, but they're not going to tell, right? So that is why we need to ask, right? So I'll ask them, okay, do you want me to show, I'll send you the data, but do you want me to show the percentage growth? Do you want me to show the average, or do you want me to give additional something? And let them say it, right? Then they will say, no, it's okay, just send me the data or just show me the percentage growth. So, give some kind of context to the information when you're giving, right? So something like this, right? This information is fine, but imagine the one I'm giving on the right. It makes so much sense now. I'm able to kind of have a better conversation. I'm able to show. So I added, very subtle, data bars on, along with these data itself. And on the right side, I've given the growth and decline, and I've given a color coding, which is basically conditional formatting I've done, right? Just to show which numbers are doing good, which numbers are doing critically bad, and so on and so forth, right? There is a lot I've done over here, and there's a lot. The quality of the conversation, which my manager can have now with the one on the right, is much better than one on the left, right? So numbers, we feel like the more we give, it's fine, but see if they need aggregates, see if they need kind of, some kind of a chart, or see if they need a total or a variance. Ask them that extra information which is not there. See if they need an extra calculated field so that, they can have a better conversation, right? They and you asking them this information in the process, like when we ask these kind of questions over a period of time, you we end up at kind of building um, some level of credibility as well, because you're showing that you're genuinely interested in giving better quality data to the managers. It builds that kind of trust and credibility as well. And this is something I've learned, I think, within the last 20 years of my career, is the more you clarify, you know, the more closer you're able to deliver to their preferences. And the better you deliver to their preferences, and the less, feedback you have to receive from them, like, why didn't you give me this? Why didn't you give me that? The more you try to reduce that feedback loop, and the more closer you're able to get to their preferences, the easier it gets for the managers to trust us and even the data we give. And eventually, and I did notice much later, like in my experience, like, in my career, much later in the career, I used to be given a lot of um, high-end tasks, to the point I was actually assigned to work with McKinsey as well. I was working with them, and I feel like that has come by not because of experience in knowledge, but also because I was able to show that I asked questions a lot. And so we need to build that habit, as when we work with data as well. If we sit behind um, the table and just do the data work, right? We are good hard workers, right? Um, but if we don't, like, to kind of shine through to the, management, and make them think like, what, X, Y, that this person is better, I think I'll trust them and doing my work. you have to show that extra effort, and that comes through communicating, which is again the huge gap, which is what I like to talk about a lot, right? It's a really huge gap out there where people miss out on that bit from um, doing the work and delivering, right? That bit, there's a huge gap. So, and that's a part, if you fill up, it makes it easier for you kind of, or for all of us in data, to kind of, it opens doors in terms of not like, I wouldn't say promotions, but just in terms of exposure to more managers and more people, because they start building trust in you. They start you know reaching out to you for more important stuff, for more important meetings, for more important analysis. So yeah, over time, so pay attention to all these smaller nuances which we all forget. We think it's nothing, but these small things, they really add up eventually, right? Something like this, right? Color labels. Look at this, I mean, this is something we all do. And in fact, very recently, I saw someone else do it as well. Where, you ask a graph and you give, there's nothing wrong in the top graph, but notice how immediately simpler it gets and so much visually peaceful in reading the graph the moment I color coordinate the labels, right? I don't have to kind of go through which one is belonging to, which data point belongs to which one, right? There is a lot of confusion that can go wrong, especially if, there is more crisscross of lines, right? Color coordinate, right? Use, position your labels up and down a little bit if you have to, right? Do so if you need it. It just makes so much easier, right? The communication, right? This is another very strong one. A lot of us make the mistake, and this is something I really like to stress on is, whenever we're showing percentages, please, as much as possible, um, depending on, the topic and the context, try to show the actual figures as well. Conversations could go totally different if you do it. For example, over here, if I just showed, the one on the left, which is, my department B is doing better in sales in department A because we achieved more, like 85% of the targets have been achieved in department B. Imagine how the boss is going to say, you know what, you department A, you guys are lazy. You guys, you cannot take any more extra breaks. Even the annual leaves, please cancel it. Make sure I want the targets to be met end of the month, right? And then maybe the team leader itself gets a fair bit of, shouting also from the boss, for instance, that you are being lazy with your team members and they're not doing really well. Imagine how that conversation goes when you realize the department A is not performing as better as department B, right? That conversation for department A is not going to be good. But just imagine if I give a real picture on this side, this is a real picture. The real picture is Department A is only meeting 71% because the targets are way higher than Department B, right? And so, and Department B is doing 85% because the targets are just 450, right? So simple things like these. Now think about how that conversation will change. Do you think that conversation where I gave a very hard time to Department A's team leader and told him to cancel the sick leaves, or sorry, to cancel all the annual leaves and be harder on the break timings and make sure maybe people do more overtime? All of that conversation could have been avoided if I just gave this, right? Now it shows a more true picture. It really shows that the achievement percentage is higher. It feels higher because the target is lower, right? So percentages when you're working, make sure we give more clarity, right? We have to understand again, we might feel like, oh, we're just giving the percentage of achievements, right? A lot of people give the left thinking it's okay, because this is what they want to see. I'll give them this, but this is not really showing the real picture. This happens a lot, even because I was working. So I was like I was handling the contact center analytics of in Dubai, and at that time, so the service levels, or it's different when you have a team which is handling 100 calls a day, and it's different for a team that is handling 20,000 calls a day. you cannot compare the performances. For some reason, management used to compare, and to date, they still do. They somehow say that the team that is handling 20,000 calls, it's relatively performing weaker than the team that is handling 10 calls. And then the problem is, again, the the people they hire to the ratio of calls they can handle, it's all wrong in the general queue where they handle 20,000 calls, in a day, overall in a day, right? So, and they're showing, and so they just report percentages, service levels, which is fine. That's what you're supposed to report, but you're actually also supposed to show the real picture that, yeah, these people are performing better is because, they have lesser calls and they are overstaffed. They don't show that picture, right? So what happens is conversations go all kinds of wrong directions, and who's to, just people have to end up in this whole vicious circle of blame game, right? We all want to really avoid that. So as much as possible, wherever you can, show the true picture. You show it. It's a different thing that a manager will come and try to say, what, this, remove this because it kind of doesn't fit my agenda. That's a separate thing. You can't help it, right? You have to listen to the bosses. But as as an analyst or a data person from your side, give the true picture and show it, right? You do your honest bit, and more often than not, you'll be surprised how much they really appreciate these small honesties, right? You will only have like a few times one or two managers will be there who will be like, no, no, this is making me look bad. Just show, remove the actuals, just show the percentages, right? But that's their problem. But from your side, be honest, right? A simple thing like this, again, access, I won't go into details, but just as much as possible, try to keep access something like this. We need to keep it as simple as possible. Like, because our minds, again, this is something to do with the mental expectations. Remember I talked about earlier? We like access, are in like 5, 10, 15, 20, or 10, 20, 30, 40. Our minds are so much easier, like we are so much used to, getting numbers in multiples of 5 in our minds. When you have some awkward increments like these, it's really hard. Sometimes it really annoys me when I sometimes, I'll see graphs which are going to go like 0, 4, 8, 16, and then, it could have been 5, 10, 15, 20, but I don't know why they start with 4, 8, 16, and then 20, and then 24. It's really weird increment. It's a bit, if you're not a data person, it will be a bit conflicting in your mind to get used to that axis, you know. So yeah, just quickly, impact of bad visualizations, I'll let you guys read through it. Just you obviously you lose the audience's trust. You actually get disengaged, and there are a lot of misleading and misinterpreted conversations that happen, and so on and so forth. I'm gonna just ask for us, like, if are we okay to stop here, or maybe like you guys want to have a casual discussion, or I'm okay to kind of stop this here and we can have discussions or show more,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah. You are free. Yeah, no problem. We have another 5 minutes, and then we can go back on Zoom, and we can stop the live on YouTube.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay. So I'll anyways to stop this here, right? But I just want to like, just casually, just generally talk about, we have like 10 myths. I don't know if I've covered that here. I don't want to cover. So I want to just really talk about 10 very popular myths, and I want to close this because this is something we all have in our minds, right? What is the 10 popular myth? I think, and all of us are going to kind of relate to this, right? So this is the one which I've already talked about already, right? We feel more data is equals to like, more insights, right? The reality is, it's wrong, right? If you're overloading a chart with too much data, right, your audiences are going to get away from the key message, right? And there is no more clarity. So that's one big no-no. Other thing is fancy graphics are always better, right? It's again wrong, right? Try to simplify the graphics as much as possible. So these are myths in our mind. I really feel like we need to know to, kind of kill those myths, right? The primary goal is to convey clearly. So make it clear. Believe me, you're not impressing anybody. And, again, I used to do that as well. And I think a lot of us do, especially in, we feel like the more we show, better colors and all that, we feel like we'll impress, but it makes it worse, right? The other myth is database is all about making charts. No, it's not, right? it is not just taking a data and make a chart, as I showed you guys along the way. It is sometimes about fitting in the right narrative. You have to talk to people and make sure it is presented for the right situation and the right context, for the right reasons, right? Otherwise, all kind of wrong conversations can happen. So it's not just about picking any data and making a chart, right? Another very big myth: audience will interpret the data the same way that we do, right? So again, it's needless to say, right? It's not correct, right? Because we need to make sure uh, we are the data people. The audience is not necessarily data person, so we need to make sure we give the data with like clear labels, annotations, context. Make it easier for them to understand. They're not necessarily going to understand from our point of view. All visualizations are objective. No, this is such a big argument that happens all the time. I really just want to be clear. The way um, data is visualized, the color we choose, the scaling, the design, it can introduce bias in the way data is interpreted, right? So we need to be very careful about these issues, right? The color you choose can make the person interpret the chart as something else, right? So even the scales we choose can make the person interpret the data as something else, right? So interpretations change. So no, it's not objective. You have to be very careful because different people will interpret data in different ways, right? So yeah, all data can be visualized effectively. um, Not all data, by the way, is suited for visualization. This is one thing we need to know, right? Some data might be too complex to even put in a chart. Some may be too simple to put in a chart. Sometimes you don't even need a chart. You can just go with giving the numbers. And sometimes, it is not fit for a dashboard. Sometimes it is not fit for a presentation. Sometimes they're too descriptive. So you can't just pick any data and make it into a chart, right? We have to understand the nuances of it, the details of it. Colorful charts are more engaging. No, some color can enhance visualization. We need some element of visual appeal, but don't take it to the point that it becomes confusing to interpret, right? Use colors very strategically, right? Number 8, interactive visualizations are all better. Again, no, not necessarily, right? Interactive visualizations, yes, in dashboards, they do add value sometimes, right? But a lot of times, and again, depending on a lot of the audiences, a very well designed static visualization, it can convey messages much more effectively, and especially when you need like a clear takeaway from a graph, or a straightforward takeaway. Static visualizations are better than interactive visualizations, right? So it's not necessary that everything has to be interactive. Um, yeah, some people say, good visualization explains itself, right? Well, sometimes even the best of the best visualizations, we need context and narrative to explain the significance of it, the importance of it, so that, you need to help guide your audience how to interpret it. Otherwise, they could interpret it in the way that they want, and which could be wrong. So sometimes you need to explain even the best of the best visualizations, right? And with finally, following trends guarantees success, right? This is another thing. A lot of people will go like, what, this is the recent trend. I've seen people doing this in bar charts, or I've seen people convert, the radial chart is a new thing right now. I'm just giving an example, right? People might skip pie charts and go with radial charts, and they might just follow some kind of special trends. But you know what? Um, Trends sometimes can become distracting and kind of take away from the core objective of the message itself. So yeah, if you want to follow trends, do so very, 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 very carefully, right? Just at the end of the day, just make sure whatever you choose, it fits the message and it is understandable by the audience. Yeah. So I'm just gonna like close it over here because I've taken an hour of you guys just you know explaining, but I'm happy to go into discussion, talk about it in detail. I hope you guys are kind of liked the examples I've showed, kind of puts into perspective, which is why I showed a lot of the examples. It puts
Mhm.
into perspective the importance of communication when I talk about, but yeah. Just, happy to,
Super.
have a discussion.
Salma, it was really awesome. I don't have any words, means it was really amazing.
It's
I've
not
been
Excel, but
Yes, but these are the things what we do in Excel, day to day, and it's very important. Yet we really the title itself, it was your message was very clear for the meetup. Communicate data effectively, communicate effectively with your data. This was a very clear message, and you have placed it up. And I wish we had more time. And maybe we can plan out some other session, sometime again, we can invite Salma if she's available. She can come and speak more about data visualization on our meetup. So my friends, I'll be just signing out from the YouTube. My friends on the Zoom, please stay back because we're going to have a chat with our guest, a quick chat, okay? And Salma, just before I end my meetup session, uh, I just always ask my speakers, any last words, any last thoughts, anything what you like to share it to the audience. It could be a quote from a Shah Rukh Khan movie or Tom Cruise movie, anything, whatever you like to say, it's your floor now.
you're asking the other guys, right?
No, no, I'm asking you, Sultana,
Ah,
Salma.
for me. Well, I
Like
don't
any
know.
quote you like to, yes, any quote, like that can inspire us. Oh, come on, yes, yes, we
You
can
know, I
go
don't
into
really have
data
any
or
code.
anything, that can motivate.
I don't know if I have any code, but you know what? I know there's something I say a lot. I say a lot, and few people understand, few people get angry, few people laugh it off. But I picked up this quote when I was in school from movies. But it's just that I just tell people, when they reach this phase of, um, when we're doing a lot of analysis and when you're doing a lot of, and we reach a phase where our mind gets blocked. I just tell them, I don't know why I say it to everyone, man, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So I don't know. I say it because I just don't give up at that phase. Wherever you get we end up reaching creative blocks wherever, whenever we're working with analysis or whatever. Um, don't just take a break, come back. Believe me, things just become so much easier, so but yeah, I don't know, it's something people kind of misinterpret a lot of ways, but whatever it is, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, so don't give up, right? That's it. Well, no shortcut codes, by the way. So yeah,
Okay,
I'm
okay,
happy to
Salma,
take
thank you
questions
so
for
much.
anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I will be. There is one question from the YouTube that it was mentioned. Do you have a blog how to make vertical split chart?
I don't have a blog to make a vertical split chart, but
Or
because
did
it's
you?
in Excel, it's it's literally just two separate charts. I mean, even I've done even wireframes for dashboards I've done for certain clients. It's literally just two charts. That's the thing, sometimes we feel like it's complicated, but it's not. It's really just two charts from the same data set placed up and down, and that's it. It's
What I can see that you have just stacked a chart below another chart, and
Yeah,
you
yeah, that's
might
it.
have
That's it.
grouped it out. This is what I can understand.
Yeah,
Am I
it's
correct?
it's really just a play on, where how you're putting one chart above the other, remove one axis, remove the grid lines and what's so, just play around. That's it. It's really simple.
Great. And I'll be just signing out from the YouTube now, my friends. So just stay back on the Zoom, my friends, because we're gonna chat with our guest over there. So I'll be seeing you soon in the next session, and this session for Women in Tech will continue. So I highly encourage that you please invite your friends and let us know what you'd like to see in the future. I'll be very happy. And thank you, Salma, once again for this amazing, amazing, amazing knowledge you have shared us today to the community. See you, friends.
Thank
Take
you. Thank
care.
you for inviting me.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. Bye bye.
Signing out from the YouTube.